The modern-day trusty sidekick of the Democrat Party, our lovely political media establishment, saw the January 6th incursion at the U.S. Capitol as a means of devastating the GOP and forever discrediting all those who dare to question the integrity of the past presidential election. Many large companies self-righteously announced they would no longer donate to the 147 Republicans that voted against the certification of the Electoral College vote. They very clearly intended on starving their re-election campaigns and driving them from the public square. Now, the good news is this has backfired spectacularly. If these clowns that let their political emotions or someone else's guide their decisions would have put just a minimal amount of thought into the situation, play things out in their head, something Democrats refuse to do with pretty much every major policy they champion to this day. Or at the very least, remember the size of Orange Man Bad's rallies across the country. They would have realized how pointless or even counterproductive that response would end up being. But as I mentioned earlier, forethought has never been a quality that the left has ever enjoyed. Now, before we dive into the actual numbers involved, let's take a quick commercial break to pay some bills. And folks, while we do that, if you could hit that like button, it'd really help this small channel grow. After that winter wake-up call and the breakdown of the power grid, nobody can deny we're all quite vulnerable. We saw power grid failures, and severe weather made the food supply chain come to a grinding halt in many parts of the country. And whenever that happens, people suffer. That's why it's smart and fairly easy these days to prepare in advance for those disasters by stocking up on long-term storage emergency food. Food that stays fresh for up to 25 years, so you never go hungry. I strongly recommend My Patriot Supply, America's leader in self-reliance. They're the only source I use for emergency food planning. And now you can save $50 off a 4-week supply of delicious meals that give you 2,000 plus calories a day. That's what you'll need to survive the next disaster, and saving $50 is impossible to pass up, but supplies are limited, so go to preparewithresurgence.com and stock up now. That's preparewithresurgence.com. Or hit that link in the description box and enjoy the peace of mind that comes with being prepared today. Okay, where were we? As one would understand, practicing a modicum of forethought, donations are up substantially for the leading critics of the election, as small donors more than replace any loss of corporate funding. Reuters reports, comically describing itself with all the editorializing about false claims of election irregularities in what is supposed to be a straight news story. Quote, if anything, the biggest backers of Trump's false election irregularity narrative, such as Missouri Senator Josh Hawley and Georgia Representative Marjorie Taylor Greene, have been rewarded with a flood of grassroots donations more than offsetting the loss of corporate money, and contributions from both small donors and rich individuals looking to fight the Democrat agenda have poured into the party's fundraising apparatus. Now, what makes me really believe that this is not just some one-off, temporary flash-in-the-pan event is that a trend has been brewing, folks, indicating that a populist revolution is underway, and the populace realizes, finally, that it must cough up cash or else surrender to the oligarchy. More from Reuters. Quote, the boycott's limited impact underscores the diminishing role of corporate money in U.S. politics. Individual donations of $200 or less have made up a growing share of campaign money in recent years, while the share given by corporate America shrinks. That trend has accelerated with the rise of anti-establishment figures on both the right and the left, such as Trump and progressive firebrand Bernie Sanders, a Vermont senator. And yes, believe it or not, leftists like Sanders and AOC are part of a, if not the, populist surge, make no mistake. And while their ideas may be repugnant and communistic in many respects, they do share a skepticism towards oligarchs and may be able to make common cause in limiting further the ability of corporations to buy influence. In point of fact, corporations already are unable to make direct donations to political candidates and must resort to the smokescreen of collecting individual donations from their well-compensated executives and then bundling them together into substantial sums intended to buy support for their agendas, especially open borders, but also maintaining the legal fiction that Facebook and Twitter and the Google gods aren't publishers but rather open forums, so they can't be sued for posts they host, even though they censor the hell out of conservatives. So angry are these pesky deplorables that they are now sending more money to GOP candidates than the oligarchs and small donors are sending to the Democrats. Reuters examined contributions by more than 45 corporate donor committees that vowed to cut off the 147 Republicans, that's 8 senators, and 139 members of the House of Representatives. The review found that the political action committees gave about $5 million to lawmakers during the 2019-20 election cycle, or only about 1% of the money the lawmakers raised, according to the Federal Election Commission, FEC, disclosures. Now, by comparison, Republican fundraising operations supporting Senate and House candidates raked in a combined $15.8 million in January alone, on the strength of small dollar donations. These groups outraised their Democrat counterparts by more than $2 million that month, regulatory filings show. Now, if you study these major corporations when it comes to politics and social issues too, they are mostly risk-averse and are not motivated by any principles beyond protecting next quarter's earnings. They're also highly vulnerable to pressure from elite institutions and academia, now dominated by the left and supplying a oh-so-steady stream of brainwashed young recruits to bureaucracies, not just in corporations, but in the media, whose criticism is greatly feared by corporate bureaucrats. This is why they're so easily intimidated by social media campaigns and what looks to them like maybe popular sentiment, when in fact, they may be less favorable by the general public than it would superficially seem. Here's a couple of examples, the first one being the best. Gillette's disastrous embrace of feminist, anti-male propaganda that cost the company billions. I will never forget that commercial. Or more recently, Coca-Cola's surrendering to racist anti-racism, currently claiming if you want to do business with Coca-Cola, you better hire a lot of black folks. Now, second thoughts already are occurring to the corporate boycotters of the GOP. In signs that the corporate backlash may already be fading, the U.S. Chamber of Commerce, the nation's leading business lobby, said Friday that it has decided not to boycott the Republican lawmakers after discussing with more than 100 companies. We are at a make-or-break moment, with Democrats attempting to push through H.R. 1, an unconstitutional federal takeover of election regulations, institutionalizing measures like mass mail-in ballot distribution, with no verification that would empower cheating forever, in effect, creating a one-party state. They do this as many of the gains of the Trump years are being erased, with hugely unpleasant consequences for ordinary Americans. Open borders, soaring gasoline prices, dependence on foreign supplies of oil, and rising crime. Democrats are currently trying to bypass the filibuster on H.R. 1. If they succeed and the SCOTUS declines to throw it out, despite the Constitution clearly giving power to state legislatures to regulate elections, then the coup will be complete. But that's far from inevitable, especially if Republicans actually grow a pair, go full throttle into pointing out the grave threat to legitimate elections that this creates. Biden's plummeting approval rating and the specter of a normal midterm shift of power away from the new, quote, president's party threatens the Democrats' hold on power unless they change the rules in their favor. See, these Democrats and the oligarchs they serve fear the ordinary American, the deplorable, if you will, grabbing back political power and electing officials who will implement the policies that benefit them. But now the big problem is that too many of these deplorables get it and are willing to open their wallets as never before. As we discussed before, corporate managers are risk-averse. If they see populism as an inevitable wave, they will get behind it with their donations, if only to gain some influence and protection, softening the blow they may have coming their way. There is a lot of history yet to be written before Americans return to the polls in 2022 and 2024. Despair seems to be the default emotion for conservatives right now. I dissent, for I believe that their institutional and media dominance has blinded progressives to the extent of their own unpopularity. Now only time will tell, but these donation numbers definitely tell a much different story than most of us are feeling, and of course, what the media in general are describing. Most of this came by way of American Thinker. If you liked it, hit that like button, subscribe if you haven't, leave a comment down below. There's a PayPal link in the description box, so please put $1 in the bucket on the way out the door. I'd like to thank everybody for all your donations. They're much needed and much appreciated. Now, with all that being said, we'll see you next time.
Come on, move! Move! Easy, easy.